Every year, around mid-February, I always seemed to have a bug problem. I could never figure out where they'd get in. I assumed there were small gaps in the door frames or windows that I couldn't see, but was big enough for these small critters to get in. Though there were a variety, they were often ants. When I saw the first signs of them this year, I stepped on some and left them, hoping their dead bodies would send a message. It didn't. Each day I left the problem, it only got worse. On the way home from work, I passed by a local corner store where I sometimes picked up small things like eggs and milk. While browsing the section of home chemicals, detergents, washing powder and the like, lo and behold, there was a cheap, white label, no-name brand bug spray on sale. It was perfect. I couldn't fathom how a good brand of bug spray would differ from a cheap one. If anything, cheaper items didn't adhere well to legal guidelines, often going overboard to be too effective, encouraging people to buy them. So, in the back of my head, I hoped it would be way over the legal poison limit. When I got home, I took to guessing where they got in. I sprayed around all my lower floor window frames and around the front and back door. That night, I went to bed smug, looking forward to seeing some dead black dots in the morning. I woke up and sleepily went to check on the areas where I sprayed. What I saw left me dismayed. In the shape of spray marks were swarms of insects, all feasting away on the liquid. It hurt my head trying to fathom the strange sight before me, but then a theory popped in my head. Maybe it was one of those poisons that's sweet and encourages the workers to take it back to their nests and kills the queen. This theory solidified when I thought about how much that made sense, and hoped it would be resolved when I returned from work. I left with a sinister smile and went to work. When I got home, I had to take a wide step over the pile of insects that were gathered in front of my door. More had came. They were falling over each other, all of them fighting at the bit to get to the sweet nectar they craved. Annoyed, I picked up the spray bottle and spritzed them excessively. A lot of the bugs at the center of the pile drowned. In my inexperienced thoughts, I figured they were fighting over the scraps, so if I gave them enough, they'd stop fighting and finally take it back to their nests. I spent the rest of the evening trying to ignore the writhing masses that formed around the house and living life as normal. I woke up dreading the idea of checking the progress. I went downstairs and my fears were confirmed. Writhing around the wall and doors were hordes of the little critters, now filling the space the extra liquid spread to. They were so dense it looked larger than life, like one big entity that made camp in my house, a living black tar roiling around the edges of every exit. When I looked closer, or at least as close as I dared get, I could see they were all still feasting away, ignorant to the drowned bodies of their fallen comrades from the night before. Annoyed, I resolved that the spray I got was cheap for a reason and went to throw it away, ready to make the haul to the big store after work to get a name brand product. However, as I picked up the cheap nasty bottle, admittedly with a heavy grip fueled by anger, it burst at the slightest touch of pressure. My eyes reflexively closed, as all at once I was covered in a cold liquid which ran down me, then across me, then up, then down again, and around. When I slowly opened my eyes, I saw why. I wasn't just covered in the strange sticky liquid, I was also coated in a thin layer of black. bugs had somehow gotten into the less than high quality seal of the bottle and started drinking away at the oh so desirable liquid from the source. These ambitious bugs somehow filled the bottle to breaking point, crushing a lot of them, as evident by the disgustingly crippled, unmoving bugs that were stuck to me. But worse were the ones that were alive, ignorant to the fact they were on a titan of death to them, more concerned about drinking that alluring tonic. I don't know whether it was some pheromone from the crushed dead bugs or the chemicals of the spray, but in its concentration, it was pungent. It smelled like a wood-scented candle, but with a chemical aftertaste. I rushed to the shower, almost hurting myself with how recklessly fast I ran, and washed away as much as I could, whilst uncontrollably sobbing at the situation. I didn't like bugs at the best of times, however this was overwhelming. Even as the black ran off me, the thick layer of them falling like liquid, I was not satisfied. I washed and washed and washed. I was in there for almost an hour, giving myself no time to eat before work, though my loss of appetite would have prevented that anyway. When I stepped out and dried up, I could still smell the faint aroma of the spray. It seemed stuck to me for the time being. Still, I had to go to work. While walking to the subway, I was getting a series of weird looks. This was because of the strange movements I was making. I'd feel a small tickling sensation, so I'd reflexively swat at it. When I would look at my hand, there'd be a dead bug. But others didn't see this, only my weird jerking and flailing. I didn't want to cause a scene, but it kept incessantly happening. However, this is only the reason people were weirded out by me. There were other people that were disgusted. This happened when someone looked at my direction, and just as we locked eyes, a small black dot would dart across me. If it were on my skin, it'd often be too fast for me to catch them. It was worse on my clothes, where I couldn't feel where they were. I could only feel the disgusted vibe of the carriage. It started getting to me. At the chance of catching a bug, I started wailing at myself, stomping on them repeatedly if one landed on the floor. People scrambled to get out the cart, the younger passengers filming me and my freak out. I tried keeping calm at work and decided to treat myself for lunch. This was an easy feat in my head. There was one food place I adored that was my go-to for lunch. A cute little family-owned cafe. This bliss didn't last long when the place was evacuated after a quick string of bug complaints. When the kitchen was inspected, they found a series of health hazards, all relating to pests. They closed for the day, maybe even for good. I felt guilty as I watched the family break down, their business in ruin so fast. They thanked me for all my years as a customer when I passed them. I didn't have the heart to tell them this all happened because of me. At work, it didn't take long to be sent home early after there were a number of complaints from co-workers. I looked down from my screen, which I was engrossed in at that point, and saw them marching ants around my desk, all clambering over each other to make a bridge, tilting off my desk and towards my chair. I could see people muttering to each other as I was escorted out, snide remarks I didn't need to hear shot at my direction. Because of the early time I was heading home, the subway carriage I was in was almost empty. It was surreal to me, as I'd only ever used the subway during peak time, when they were packed with other 9-to-5 workers, all droning back and forth from our jobs. I nervously looked around the carriage, staring at the many empty seats, all in an effort to avert my gaze from the one passenger with me. My only company was a meek-looking girl. Despite the vast emptiness of the carriage, she was sat dead next to me, her face almost pressed against mine, her gaze locked in my direction. I couldn't figure out if I should be flattered or worried. The timing confused me more, as it was Valentine's Day. An image that she was lonely for the day and was craving company on the companion-themed Hallmark holiday popped in my head. But in contrast, I also thought she might have been less than subtle at watching the insects nest across me. She had a curious look on her face in the brief moments I glimpsed in her direction. It was a cute, wide-eyed look, as though she was trying her best to memorize this experience. Eventually, I caved in and tried conversing. I nervously choked out a greeting. However, she didn't respond at first. She just opened her mouth in a trance. She almost looked like she was salivating at the lips. And I don't mean that in a guy way. I mean, inside her mouth was saliva visibly pooling a little bit around her tongue. Being introverted, I wasn't used to this kind of attention, if it even was attention one could get used to. I nervously asked when she was getting off, trying to cut the tension. Her only response was the phrase, "Whenever you are," in a darker than expected tone. This hit me as a red flag to leave. At my stop, I dipped out the carriage where she followed. I picked up my pace, hastily trying to exit the subway. She followed suit. I shot back an open comment for her to leave me alone, which fell on deaf ears. When I looked back, she had an almost hypnotized look in her eyes, lustful for something I couldn't quite figure out. When I exited the building and turned the corner, I took the blind spot as a chance to start running, hoping she'd take that as a strong hint that I wasn't interested in anything to do with her. I flicked my head back to see how much distance I gained, and panic made me run faster when I saw she had the same idea and was now following suit, sprinting right behind me. This made me pick up my pace. I was no longer trying to get away from an awkward social interaction, and was now trying to run from something much worse. As, in the brief moment I looked back, she seemed different. Behind the skin on her cheeks, I could see the protrusions of what looked to be strange mandibles. Her maw was open and twisting in an impossible way. Her eyes were glazed over in an almost gloss black. What terrified me more was that she was surprisingly fast for a girl with such a thin frame. I managed to slam my front door shut in time before the heavier than expected crash of the girl followed. Between slams which pushed the door open ever so slightly, I managed to flick the lock, bolting the door closed. Any semblance of feeling secure slipped away when I heard the banging stop and her scuttling footsteps slip away. Soon, there were scratching sounds from my window. I didn't hesitate to trudge through the now piled mass of bugs to be greeted by a disturbing image through the glass. Her face was contorted to a twisted visage of an insect, yet still retained human features. A disgusting hybrid which had no place on this earth. The only thing stopping me from freezing in fright was the comfort of her being behind the glass. As long as she remained on the other side, I felt safe. I flicked my window's lock for security, which made her dart away again. This time I knew where she was going and headed in the same direction, I was greeted by a twisted image in the next window. Between the bugs pooling on my windowsill, I flicked that lock too. This turned into a cat and mouse chase around my house until we were back at the front door. There, she started bashing again, the wood creaking with each hit. I slid down, sitting in the writhing blackness that was pooling around the bottom. It was horrifying to do, yet it was bearable, knowing my body weight was helping keep the threat outside from getting in. What's worse was that by sitting in the puddle, I realized I got more of that mysterious liquid on me, something she immediately picked up on and sent her more into a frenzy. Suddenly, a meek voice sounded from outside between the slams. She was pleading with me to let her in. She described how tantalizing I smelt and that she just wanted a taste. Admittedly, that would have been an alluring offer if the situation were different. I never entertained her offer, forcing her to try a new angle. All she said was that she was going to find a way in no matter what, in an ominous tone. It wasn't hard to figure out what she meant. I heard shuffling, but this time upwards. I pictured her clambering up the guttering and knew I had a bedroom window up there. In a flash, I darted up the stairs into the window. I almost slipped back when I saw her, not expecting to see her so clearly outside. She was staring in, while her arm, now bent in a strange way, was clambering at the seal. Once I regained my balance, I flicked the lock, and the chase began once more. I followed the shuffling around, window to window, when something hit me. There wasn't guttering all around the house, yet she was making the rounds as fast as I was. Out of one window, I took a peek and saw how she was getting around. It wasn't just her arm that was bent at a strange angle. It was all her limbs. They were now all arched over, clinging to the wall like an insect. I watched her gain a head start as she scuttled across my wall to the next window. However, I managed to lock it before she made any progress. Once we lapped again, she scuttled back down, leaving me to press up against the front door once more. I took this time to slip out my phone, brushing away the pile of bugs that crawled inside my pocket, and called the police. I felt I couldn't tell the full story, so I settled on telling them a crazy person was trying to get in my house. This was reinforced by the heavy bashing on my door, which echoed through the call. They promised to act fast, and I was left to hold the fort. Each minute that went by felt stretched out. By the time the police arrived, I was in tears, covered in the uncomfortable writhing of the insects I was sitting on. As I heard the car pull up, I heard the frantic scuttling of the lady slip away. I heard the police knock urgently, which I answered, wiping my face. In front of me were two police officers, a male and female. I urgently told them the crazy person was nearby. Once they saw I was okay, the woman nodded at the guy and he set off to look for the assailant. She remarked about my condition. I was haggard, insects making their home all over me. I looked in a state. She looked hesitant at first, seeing the condition of the entryway of my house. However, she showed her duty and asked if she could come in. Looking to be assured, I gladly accepted. As soon as she put one foot in, she leaned closer to me. I let her inspect me, feeling there might have been an important detail on me for the investigation. She leaned her head closer to the insects, closer to my body. To my surprise, all she did was take in a small, sharp, sniff. She took it in and leaned back with a look of contemplation. In a curious tone, all she said was that I smelled good.